Can you guys hear my mic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll begin in around 1 more minute.
I have to leave after 15 minutes and I'll be back for the last 15.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I think we can start now. So, hello everybody. I'm Sankalp, and I'm one of your mentors for Codebusters. And Anusha is also on this call, and she's the other mentor for Codebusters. Now, before we begin, I'll say that this meeting is probably not going to take the full hour. It'll probably be around 30 to 40 minutes. So, okay. So, let's start with the rules. If Anusha
Yeah.
wants to speak.
Yeah, so just a quick overview. Um key point, you can bring a calculator to the event, obviously to do math, to solve math equations, but you can't bring like a graphing calculator. You can't bring a scientific calculator. So your calculator basically can only have like the numbers 0 to 9, um, and then just the basic like plus, minus, multiply, and divide. It can't be a scientific one where you have like um, log and exponents and stuff on that. They won't let you in with that calculator. So that's one key point. The second thing is there are no notes allowed on this test. Um, in the event parameters, it says that um, the event supervisor will provide a copy of a resource sheet, and this resource sheet is going to contain Morse code, English, Spanish letter frequencies, which we'll go over later, a Porta table, an Atbash table, and Baconian mappings. And it'll contain basically any of these like resources that you need for questions in the exam. And then moving on to the competition section, this is basically just a list of like, don't open the exam packet before your proctor says to start, and you can't write after they say to stop. Um, Also, there's like a list of all the ciphers that are going to be on the test. So I think we're going to go over almost all of them in our meetings. Today, I think we're going over three. Um, you'll see in F, there's like, you'll see the list of ciphers that are going to be used in the state and national competitions. And then you'll also see that there's a special bonus. There are going to be questions in the test packet that are going to be marked as special bonus questions. And so you can see the awarding. If you solve one, that's 150 points extra. If you solve two, you get 400 points extra. And if you solve three, you get 350. And typically, obviously, because these are special bonus questions, these are going to be harder than the rest of them. But then you also get a huge benefit if you end up solving all three of these bonus questions.
And then
Yeah.
one more thing, which it's not in this slide here. At the beginning of the test, there's a timed question, and the faster you do it, you get like way more points. So I think the time question, it's the most important question on the test, because if you do it really fast, you can get like a lot of points, which could give you a really big lead. And I know like a lot of teams, they don't actually solve the time question. So I think one strategy you could do is have two people on your group start working on the time question when the test is given, and then the other person in your group starts doing other ciphers so you don't lose time if you don't manage to solve the time question.
Okay,
Okay.
so just a quick overview of Codebusters. If you guys don't already know, it's basically just an event where you have to solve ciphers, and these are like messages that have some sort of like meaning to them. And like Sankopa was talking about the time question, you want to do these as fast as you can. Obviously, you still have that 50-minute limit, so you want to be able to solve as many of these ciphers as you can. Um, unlike wait, what just happened?
But okay. Um, should I explain the slide while you fix your issue?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so unlike a lot of study events or build events, Codebusters, it's not about like how much you study, because of course you need to study how to do the ciphers, but more of it comes from practicing, and the more you practice like a lot of these ciphers, the faster you're able to do it, and the faster you're able to learn like tips and methods of how to do it faster, because some of these ciphers, there's no clear method to do it. There's no step by step, you need to do this and that. It's just based on clues, word frequencies, word patterns, sentence frequencies, just a lot of those stuff, which you only develop over time. So the more you actually practice Codebusters, the better you'll be. Okay. So the easiest ciphers, there's two easiest ciphers I would classify, and when you get your test, I would recommend one person in the group start doing those first because they're really easy and they're basically 3 points. So the first one of these are the Caesar cipher. So, whoops. The Caesar cipher, it's it's basically all the letters are shifted by one place. So suppose you have the letter A and the letter B. So you have a word that's just AB. Now, if this was any mono alphabetical substitution, which is basically the most common cipher, A could be any letter and B could be any letter. So you could have like VX or like SD for any substitution of AB. But for a Caesar cipher, all the letters are shifted one place. So an example of this is, I'm just going to use this table right here. This is the plain text. So this is what you see in
Wait,
the,
Sankopa, really quick. I think you're
yeah.
not sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm not, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, that got canceled. Let me share. Okay, there.
Yeah.
Okay, go back. But the Caesar cipher, basically every letter is shifted up or down the alphabet in a certain amount of steps. So if A becomes B, then B becomes C, and C becomes D. It's not a jumbled mess, it's just the whole alphabet shifts by a place. So if A is C, then B is D, and then C is E. And normally in Caesar ciphers, the method is that you tackle on a whole word. Like over here, you see WKLV. You want to start working on not by letter, but word by word. So after W, it would be V, or no, X. And then you just work on like what letters come after each of these. And then you see one letter after that's not a word, two letters after that's not a word. And you basically keep doing this until you find something that works, and then you do that same thing for all the rest of the words. And a common mistake I see is people working up the alphabet. So suppose it was A, B, C, D. People would start from going shifting up one. So they would go from A to B and B, and then to C and then to D. But normally, how the Caesar cipher is, and mainly on the test work, is that it's faster to do them backwards. So you go from A to Z and from Z to Y, because normally if you go forwards, it would take like 18 to like 20 steps. If you go backwards, most of the ciphers on the test will be much faster when doing it backwards. And these are only Caesar ciphers. So then a few tips is that, so normally you'll get like a table like this in the test where you have all this A, B, C, D on the top. This is basically the letters you see in the text. So it's the plain text. It's what you see in the jumbled up thing. So you see the slide of WKLV, that's the plain text. So here, a table would be like, what do, what would W respond to? That's what replacement means. Once you figure out what W corresponds to in the ciphertext, which is basically the answer, you put that there. So W in this case, I'm not going to solve it because it would take a lot of time, not too much though. W in this case would be T. So once you find out that W is T by working backwards a couple of steps, then you go over here in this table, you see W, you'd replace it with T, and then you go to K, you find out what K is, and then you do that. So that's what you could do, but a much faster way to do it is once you find out that W is T, or in this bottom example here, you see that A corresponds to S, B corresponds to T. So once you figure out one of these letters, because it's a Caesar cipher, and everything is shifted up by the same place, after S in the replacement would be T. So you basically write out the alphabet until you get to Z, and then you restart at A, because that's basically what a Caesar cipher is. The whole ciphertext is the plain text, just shifted up a couple of steps. So if you figure out one word, you don't need to calculate it for everything else. You can just fill out the table that they provide you beneath and just fill it out and then replace it, which is much faster. So, Anisha, do you want to explain the cipher?
It basically takes your plain text, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and reverses it. So it's going to be like you see on the screen Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, right? So when you see, like, for example, G, S, R, H, you're going to basically take this reversed alphabet and look at the corresponding. So if you see S, you can see that it directly maps onto H, R maps onto I, and then you do it like so on and so forth. You will be provided a table that like has the plain the A B C D E F G all the way to Z, and then underneath it A B C D in reverse. So you'll have a good idea of like which letter maps onto which, and that's gonna be part of your like I think resources packet. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's basically the Apache cipher. And one thing to be said is that the tables, right? So at the start of the test, you'll be provided with a bunch of resource tables. This a lot of tables are used for a lot of different ciphers, like for the app bash. This is one of the ways you can see it. The other way is that it just lists it all the way from A to Z on the other side, like Z to A. This is just like a more condensed version. But you'll be provided with the reference sheets that you need, which you don't need to bring your own notes. Like, I mean, you can't do that. So they basically counteract this by giving you these reference sheets, which are basically necessary. So you don't need to worry about memorizing tables. So I talked about monoalphabetic substitution before, but basically what that is that one letter in a plain text always corresponds to another letter in a ciphertext. So the letter A, if it's G, then any A on the plain text will always refer to a G on the ciphertext. And if there's a G on the ciphertext, that means its plain text correspondence is A. For a monoalphabetic substitution cipher, this will always be the same for things that pair up. So A can't be B and C, it can only be a one-to-one. So one of the most common types are aristocrats, and they will also be the one that you see most common in the test. Aristocrats, there's no real step-by-step method of how to solve it, like you see in the Caesar or Apache ciphers. You basically have to know a ton of different techniques that'll help you solve them. So this is an example of an aristocrat right here. Like, can you guys see my cursor? Like, my cursor on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a problem aristocrat. So it's basically like the text just says, or the prompt just says, why it's a fine day on the golf course, isn't it? And what they expect you to do is just solve this aristocrat, and what this corresponds to in the ciphertext will be the answer to that. So sometimes this text at the top will give you a hint, but if you're like me and know nothing about golfing, then you don't need to do that. That's just a little bit of extra advantage people who know random things will be able to do. But if we analyze this plain text, one of the easiest way to start is looking at one-letter words. So here we see the letter S, and letter S is the only one-letter word here. In English, the only one-letter words are I and A. That means the S over here maps to I or A. And there is a way we can figure it out here. So we see these SDU, this is a word, SMG, another SDU. They're all three-letter words starting with the same S. So if this S was I, then there'd have to be like two three-letter words that starts with I in a row, which is really uncommon. Like, try thinking of a three-letter word that starts with I at the top of your head. It's kind of hard to do. And then twice in a row. If the S was A, it would be much more common and would be a better place to start. Because in Codebusters, suppose the S really did map to an I, it would be really hard to know that. And sometimes you have to like go with whatever you can and you have to brute force it because there's a lot of these on the test and you can't be spending all your time on a single one trying to like go through every possible combination. So we can safely map S to A. So I don't have like a pen here, but assume that this S or all the S's correspond to an A. Now, the next thing we can look at is the contraction. So here we see QSM and then the contraction apostrophe and then an N or a quotation, single quotation mark. And this is mainly a contraction or a possessive noun. So like it could be like anything that ends with an S, like dogs, cats, mans, and then also a contraction like can't, don't, won't. But like one of the most common things, the N can either be an S or a T. That's mainly the most common options it can be. If it's something else, it's either really rare and I can't think of it off the top of my head, or it's impossible. So we have two options for N. Now, another thing, before I go into this, another thing you need to know about most Codebusters prompts is that they're based off of quotes. They're based off of like things a lot of people said in the past that made them sound smart. So they have like all these big ideas like good, greatness, power, a lot of different themes. Now this one's about golf course. Like most quotes in general, if there's a contraction here or like a possessive noun and it's not a contraction, then the next most common thing is for it to be mans, like MAN quotation mark S. And if we also go by our original guess of like can't, we see that S and M, they are A and N. Because we already know that S is A, so it can't be don't or won't, but it can be can't, and then it can also be mans. So we can also like try to map M to N because using that logic. And then another thing we can also try to do is we see over here TM at the top. We also see TK. So we have multiple two-letter words that start with the same letter T. Now, most of the time, like this can be a lot of different vowels, but most of the time this will be I because I just has a lot of different two-letter words that starts with I, like it, is, if, in, and those words appearing in a quote are way more common than the other two-letter words that start with other vowels. So it's also like a safe prediction to say that T is I. And any time when you think your prediction is wrong, you can always erase it because you don't have to like assume that everything you say is right. Because if it's wrong and you find out that you went into a rabbit hole where like nothing makes sense, you can like backtrack a little and then try to figure out something else. Anyways, assume we fill out all that we went through before. Now we'll approach something like this. So now is the part where we can make educated guesses. Because we got a lot of different clues, we can start looking at the words themselves. So looking at this big word VTWONMTMW, we see that there's an NIN near the end. Now, normally, if you have like, you can ignore the N, but the N also adds like, it's more common when there's an N in front of this too. The ING ending, we already have the IN, so a G here as W is really common and would probably be a really good guess to do because there's really not a lot that fits into this. It could be like S sometimes, but G being there is way more common and would be a way more reasonable guess. Now, you see the part here. Assume we do put this as G. So we have something and then it ends with NING. Now this comes from experience, and the more you do it, you'll get more experience with words. But the most common thing that fits this is lightning. Because you also got to realize that the V, so if we put a G here, then the W here is also a G. And then the V, O, and M are all different letters because they all have different plain text. So it will be different ciphertext. And just by looking at that, you can make an educated guess that it's lightning. Now, if you find out that it's lightning, the N corresponds to a T. So whenever you fill out a guess or any letter, you want to make sure that you fill out every plaintext counterpart. So if we put the N to a T here, then this N over here will also be a T, and then we can assume that, well, I can turn on a pen here. So then if this N is a T, and this whole thing is lightning, then because this N is a T, then this will also be a T. And then we have this A and T here, and we can safely say that that is a C. And then suppose I fill it out like this. What I'll be doing now, before I make any more guesses, is mapping everything. So we see the N corresponds to a T, so I need to find everywhere else where there's an N, and I need to map it to a T. And I think that's all the occurrences. And I see a Q, and then I map it to a C. But basically, you have to do things like that. So then the next thing we can do is, let's see, this part right here. We see the O over here matched to an H, so we can do that. And the W over here maps to a G, so this will be a G. Now this word, you can also educatively guess this to be caught. That looks pretty obvious. And then another thing you can do here is this part looks like and another thing that I'll say is that when you have three-letter words that start with A. The two most common ones are and are, because and is a coordinating conjunction. So when you have quotes that are really long, and is going to appear a lot, or like a lot in those quotes. So like, and is going to be a lot of common in those quotes, and you really have to look out for those whenever there's a comma in front of a word. And R is just like a really common word in general, and after and, it's like the most common word that's the three-letter word that starts with A. So my SDU guess here, I would most likely put it as R right here. So mainly going from this, you can educated guess a lot of these. The G over here, you mapped it to a D, so this G would be a D, and this word looks like afraid. And then if you map all these letters to other letters, you'll basically figure out the quote. And once you're like at this stage, you for sure know that all your guesses so far are right, so you don't need to backtrack from there, and you're already on a good pace to finish that one. Now, another thing that you can do is a frequency table. So this basically shows the most common letters in the English alphabet that appear in quotes, I'm pretty sure. So the best way to memorize them is just say Italian Shirtaloo. So that's a really fast way to memorize them. And it goes from like the most common letter to like the least one here. So if you memorize like Italian Shirtaloo and you're like stuck on like a quote or whatever back here. So if you like see that there's a lot of U's, so this particular quote is like you see a U here, a U here, a U here, here, and here. So here, I would most likely, if I don't have anywhere to start, I would guess the most common letter to be E. So that might not always be the case because in this case other letters seem to be more common, or U is just not above those common. So like if we look at this, the difference between E to T is like 3.26%, whereas from it to T to A is like 1%, and then it goes less difference each time. So E should have like a significantly higher frequency than the other alphabets. So if you find that there's like a frequency table like back here, you have this frequency table, and suppose instead of this to be 10, this was like 15, I would most likely guess this to be E if I don't have anywhere else to start, because E should be, the margin between E and the next letter is significantly higher than everything else. So I would start with that. And then practice resources.
Wait, real
Anisha, do
quick.
you want to explain
Yeah,
this?
yeah. Before I do that, Arshia, do you have a question? No? Okay.
Oh,
Okay, yeah. So just moving on to practice resources. So these are three links. I think we'll provide them in the Teams channel after this. They're really great resources for you to like practice these skills. Um, like we stated earlier in the meeting, this isn't like a normal theory event where you can just memorize and then expect that like you'll medal or like get first place. You really need to practice and like continue solving these ciphers so that on the test you're able to solve like 30 ciphers in like 50 minutes. Um, so yeah, these are great resources to practice from. That being said, we did only get sixth in regionals using these resources. So obviously, if you want to place or earn a medal, we would recommend that like you go find more resources other than this. specifically find resources for like specific ciphers that you're struggling on. I know that like before the test, just because I wanted to have it in my head, I would usually go through like all the ciphers that I was doing, search them up on Google, read like a 1 minute article on them just to like refresh them. And so I think finding resources on your own on like specific ciphers, maybe you find a better website, a website that gives like more harder, more complicated problems. Um, yeah, so you could use that. But yeah, we're just providing like basic resources that can help you out a lot with practicing these ciphers.
Yeah, so that's the end of the presentation I have planned. So if you want to, uh, I'll quickly go through these resources and show them. Let me share this. Okay, so this is the main website where I practice aristocrats, and it's basically cryptograms.puzzlebaron.com. And you can just click play without any account. And oh wait, Arshia, do you have a question?
Yeah, so like I was wondering if all the ciphers you learned in this meeting, is that all, or like is there more to like remember?
There's more to remember, and we'll briefly go through them in the next meeting so you know them before invitationals. So like, there's like I think 10 or so different types of ciphers, like 10 to, yeah, around 10. So this meeting, I just explained three of them, and one of them is like the most common one. For the
Is
next
there
meeting, yeah,
is there a list of the ciphers that we have to study that we could find?
yeah. So they're on the rules, but I'll also post them in the Teams channel right after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So next meeting, I'll just briefly go over all those ciphers that we didn't go this meeting. And then after invitationals through regionals, that whole time period, I'll just go through each of the ciphers in depth for the other meetings. So this is the first resource I put. It's you can just hop into it without an account. You don't need to register. But basically, it's like they put a ton of different quotes from a lot of different sources, and they have like a whole frequency table here. And whenever you enter a letter, it just pops up everywhere. And it's a great way to start doing ciphers and just learning them. And if you're unable to like find anything or you don't know how to get a lead on anything, there's a hint that shows you like one vowel each time, and it caps out as at all five vowels, and you can't hit after that. So even if you wanted to try to find the answer, you can't really do that. And if you decide that it's way too hard, then you can always like refresh the page and it'll give you a new cipher. Now, I would recommend that if you're like new to it, start with like these bigger quotes. Now, it does mark it as difficult. These are gonna be like they'll take more time to finish, but they have like more clues and more ways for you to actually figure things out than if it's a short cipher and you need to like really go through on like word patterns and stuff. And the second source is Toby's or however you pronounce it. And basically they just have a ton of practice tests for like Div B. They also have it for Div C if you want to like challenge yourself. And then you can also, if you want to, if you find like a cipher online and you want to try to solve it, looks like one of these random ciphers like nihilist or Baconian, you can create those questions and like solve it. So the way they have it, if I go to this, I think if you go to like test packet or answer key, one of these ones, you can basically go through it like it's an actual test, and and then you can check the answers at the end. So it's similar to this one, except if you fill one in, it doesn't fill everything else. You just have to go through them, but it's a really nice source if you actually want to practice them. And then this is one that I would recommend for the person who's doing cryptorhythms in your group. So if you split up all your ciphers, the one who's doing cryptograms, basically they're just these puzzles that are like sign plus more equals money, and then each letter maps to a different number. Like down here, it just shows how to solve this basic one, but they have these ones. If you want to, I would recommend go through them, because they're kind of simple, but they have a lot of depth to it. So if you just know a little bit about cryptograms and practice them through these worksheets, which, I mean, this is not the only site. There are like a lot of these random sites that have these cryptograph worksheets. You will probably be able to know like a good level of cryptograms. But that's basically all the sources, and I'll also post these links into the channel. But that's basically everything for this meeting. So does anyone have any questions? If not, I can just end the meeting right now. Okay, it seems. Okay, yeah. So I'll end the meeting right now. And the next meeting, it's not going to be next week. It's going to be on the 20th. So we're alternating weeks. So there's no meeting next week, but the week after that, there's going to be a meeting for Codebusters. But yeah, that's the end of the meeting. And if you want, you can leave.